Hi, welcome to today's video. This one's a bit different from my usual video essay slot because today I'm going to be showing you my 9 precious subscribers. The fun of Genograms using 2 behated families, the Kratosians and the Odinsons. Yay! I've remade this video like 3 times at this point, and I just need my beautiful thought baby out of my head. So, what are Genograms, you attentive viewers should be asking? Well, they are by far my favorite type of model, diagram, graph thing ever. They are used as a way for mental and physical health professionals for tracking conditions through a family tree. Mental health professionals especially love these as they can be used to visually track and depict relationships and generational behavior throughout a client's family line. There will be a legend all throughout the video, but basically, silly pictures represent the character. When there is a line connecting people, that indicates a relationship. When a line is connected under 2 people, it means they have some kind of intimate relationship. And when that relationship spawns a child, the child is depicted under the connecting line. If we only know one parent, it is typically just a straight line under the parent we know to the child. Red stuff equals bad news bears, and green stuff means good old scares. An X on a person's symbol indicates death, but I don't always use them due to some of these characters dying and then coming back 2 seconds later like nothing happened. Kratos, for example, dies at least once in every game it feels and comes back about 2 seconds later. An X on a line means manipulation, while an X on a square means control. Arrows are used to display one-way relationships. Gaps or full disconnects mean neglect or full disengagement. A circle typically means love, but I also use it with an arrow to mean obsessive love. This isn't exactly a very accurate depiction of a real genogram, obviously. People are usually represented by geometry instead of funny pictures, but seeing as there really isn't any information to put in those boxes, because the only diagnosis I could give someone like Aries is Mimi Head, but I feel that this is still a valuable thought experiment because you can see how the relationships are reflective of one another, and also it's my video, fuck you. So yeah, first thing you might notice is the insane amount of red. Yeah, there isn't a murderer and murderee genogram relationship, but if there were, it would be all over here. That being said, I did put red Ks on all the people who were slaughtered by the Spartan, which is most of them, including Kratos himself, because he is just as suicidal as he is homicidal. So sad. I also included the Odin family because I think this diagram honestly helps depict a lot of the thematic relationships between the Greek and Norse games to light. Also, whenever you see a bunch of lines coming together, that's to conveniently depict when a lot of individuals have a similar relationship for visual convenience. Before discussing anything God of War, we have to understand that Kratos is truly a family guy. The only reason he's so Kratos is because he only cares about his family, whether it be his first wife and child, his brother, the Spartans, or boy, they always act as the primary motivators. Unfortunately, his older deity brother knew this more than anyone. When Kratos reached out to Ares in a moment of supreme weakness, he asked, "Waiter, oh waiter, destroy my enemies and my life is yours," and then Ares took that and said, "Okay, but the tip will cost you." Yeah, ultimately, the first most defining moment, not chronologically, but in the whole series, release date-wise, was definitely when Ares manipulated and controlled Kratos into killing his own family in hopes of maximizing his new toy brother's destructive powers. This worked incomprehensibly well, as this would be one of the most crucial dominoes to fall that would lead to the entire pantheon being eviscerated by Mr. of Sparta. Unfortunately for Ares' masterful plot, the first thing, relatively, that Kratos destroyed after the incident was Ares himself. This is essentially the story of God of War 1 in so many words, but this relationship of controlling and manipulative violence used in order to get Kratos to kill other family members only for it to backfire and leave everyone connected to the scheme dead by Kratos' hands is very common in Kratos' Greek pantheon family. After Ares, Zeus became the main overarching villain of the series, and the relationship between him and Kratos is really what bleeds out to the rest of the pantheon, and is even really what led to Ares' manipulation in the first place. But to talk about that, we have to talk about the Titanomachy. To understand Zeus, and really the entire pantheon, we have to start with the Titans. We don't get info on the very, very first Greek deity, Chaos, but we do get to know Gaia very well. She is the girl boss of life with big rocky boobies and a literal bush. While she becomes the head manipulator of the Titans later, it's her son Kronos that was considered king of the Titans all those years ago. It's unknown if Kronos took power from Gaia using underhanded conspiracy and schemes like the gods typically do, but let's just say the bush doesn't fall far from the other bush. Seriously though, this shot is insane and completely unnecessary. Anyway, Kronos hooks up with this normal-sized woman, somehow, and spits out a litter of ungrateful little shits. Unfortunately for Father Time, a prophecy comes about that one of his normal-sized children is definitely going to usurp and kill him. So, as a measured and rational response, he fucking does an infant mukbang on all of his children. Except one! His breeder babe, Rhea, for some reason takes issue with her baby daddy eating her spunk spawn, and tricks Kronos with a rock. You brain-dead, bushy bitch! That's not your kid! That's a stone, you idiot! I bet you feel stupid now. So Zeus secretly lives under the watchful and manipulative care of Gaia, training to one day fulfill the prophecy and take his rightful place as king of Olympus. Sadly for Granny Gaia and the rest of the Titans, when Zeus takes action, what should have been a private father and son issue bled out to an all-out war between the Titans and the new gods. Yeah, I think this one instance of genuine love between mother and son is actually the medium that allowed Kronos' fear and hate to bring down the entire Titan population, including his shifty mom. But yeah, man, the exact same thing happens with Zeus and his bastard-to-be, Kratos. Who would have guessed, once Zeus secured his title of worst son ever, lo and behold, he got the exact same prophecy. He must have been like, are you fucking kidding me? This, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call karma, and is why the only real religion is Hinduism. Actually, a fun fact about the God of War and religion is that Kratos was originally intended to become one of the three wise men, like from the Bible, like from Jesus. This is real, look it up. Fat Brett said so it must be true. I love you, Fat Brett. Watch his stuff if you like God of War, he's amazing. So yes, Zeus is told that a red-marked warrior will destroy Olympus, and also that one of his children will overthrow him. I wonder if this is a coincidence that he happened to canoodle this Callisto lady that birthed two children, one with red marks. Zeus, seeing his threatening little bastard, decides to send his top two bastards to go take care of him. Unfortunately, the meathead gene runs as strong as familial homicide in this family, because they got the wrong one. You guys had one job. One! Well, it's not really their fault, because you see the distinct red marks are genetic, and you see Kratos was just a late bloomer compared to his poor brother, Deimos. Deimos in traditional Greek myth is actually the son of Ares and Aphrodite, and the brother of this guy Homophobos. He was actually the god of fear back in the day, but now he's repurposed as Kratos' sad little brother, who happened to be another repurposed deity guy that nobody cared about. In Ghost of Sparta, it is revealed that Ares and Athena, who we'll get to soon, trust, are revealed to have kidnapped Deimos under Zeus's order, and did not just kill him, but gave him to death itself for some nefarious purposes. Kratos finds this out when he stumbles upon none other than his mother, Callisto, who Zeus cursed never to tell Kratos anything, and also to turn into whatever this thing is. Kratos kills her out of mercy and frees her of her curse, but if you think Mr. Gao has bad daddy issues, remember, his mom looks like this. No wonder he's into giantess. Of course, this issue does wrap back around to Zeus's violent control, but still, let's not ignore the fact he lacked a proper mom. Kratos eventually stumbles into the land of the dead, and finds Deimos in what I can only assume to be Thanatos' sex dungeon. By the time Kratos finds him, Deimos has become revolted and infuriated by his brother, and rightly so. He was imprisoned for future crimes he didn't even commit, a temporally distorted frame job. And I'm so glad I played Ghost of Sparta, because the relationship Kratos has with Deimos is deliciously nuanced and a foreshadowing of the relationships to come. Instead of doing what we'd probably expect, see his brother is angry and just kill him. He does defend himself and fight back, but with a distinct layer of guilt and sorrow. He does not blame his brother for hating him. In fact, he very much blames himself. Even if he hadn't committed them yet, it was still Deimos who was framed for the heinous acts Kratos would eventually do every Tuesday or so. Thanatos eventually interrupts the loaded sibling rivalry and tries to finish off Deimos for good, because Kratos killed off Death's daughter, annoying a bird lady, because that's what Kratos does if you did not know. Kill people. The god of death ironically is really bad at killing people, as he leaves his victim dangling off a cliff with just the right amount of time left for Kratos to save him with brotherly love. In exchange for saving his life after ruining the last 20 or so years of it, Deimos decides, hey, this guy's alright. And Kratos is like, oh, you. And they fight Thanatos together in an epic PSP final battle. What I find so cool about this fight is that the way you control Deimos as an assistant is like the basis of what would become Atreus and Freya's gameplay to come. That being, mash the button to fire the world's worst projectile of all time and sometimes have a joint QTE. It's not good, but hey, it's cute to see that the basis of how Kratos plays with his loved ones has always been there. It's a bizarre bit of retroactive gameplay storytelling, but I love it. Oh yeah. Deimos dies at the end because Kratos cannot have anything good in his life, at least with his narcissistic megalomaniac father in the picture. Now onto Kratos' other siblings, which I assure you are not nearly as forgiving as the brother of Sparta. First, let's talk about probably the relationship with the most nuance and screen time from the Greek games. Athena, she's a bitch. Athena in traditional myth is depicted as the counterpart to Ares. She is actually the goddess of strategic war, because she was Zeus's literal thought baby. However, in this series, she's more like the god of gaslighting, because holy shit, she is just the worst. Much of the manipulation and control put into Kratos from Zeus is actually carried out by Athena, who is like Zeus's #1 meat writer. I know that's incestual, but that has never ever stopped any Greek deity, especially Zeus. Athena isn't just Zeus's lapdog though. She also uses Kratos for her own goals, or at least what she thinks are her own goals. To give you an example of this pious princess's bitchery, Kratos didn't just kill Ares by his own anger. He was actually encouraged to and helped immensely by Athena, who was using Kratos to kill Ares to end their petty sibling rivalry. The sibling rivalry which was only stirred up by Zeus to keep his workers divided so that they may not revolt on him through teamwork, like any good parents or world leader. Unfortunately, Ares was actually using his little bastard bro to eventually usurp Zeus, but that's when he pushed Kratos a little too far and into the arms of the other Olympians, particularly Athena. So again, this all goes back to Zeus being a little pussy dickhead as usual. But when Kratos finally does the deed and game ends Ares, he goes up to Athena and is like, "Can you erase my memories now?" By the way, the carrot the gods were using to fuck with Kratos was that they were going to erase his memories of killing his wife and child, but then Athena, dead ass, is like, no, you are actually so awful and so evil that not even we, the almighty goated gods, can wipe away your sins. Get fucked, idiot. And so Kratos does get fucked, until Athena is like, wait, we can still use you as the god of war. Who else is going to make sure Hitler doesn't pass art school? And so he did, happily ever after. This is just the tip of the iceberg of the absolute buffoonery Athena pulls on poor Destroyer of Worlds. At the end of Gao 2, Kratos is like 1 inch away from killing Zeus and being done with his foolish revenge, but then old Daddy Meat Rider shows up out of nowhere and takes the bullet for her papa. Probably didn't even notice. While this sacrifice was made for a noble cause, again, I think it would have been a lot better if you just let Zeus die. She says, "Zeus is Olympus," as she dies, but this prolonging of his fate only ensures even greater destruction of Greece. Idiot. Even though Kratos killed her because he didn't turn friendly fire off on his sword, she actually comes back as a porcelain force ghost. While it isn't revealed until the end of Gao 3, Athena is actually using Kratos again to build Athenaland once Zeus is gone. And this just shows what kind of a true wicked woman this lady is. It's even worse because of all the gods, she seems to be the one with the most knowledge of morality and ethics. But that only makes her worse in my eyes, because she uses these appeals to most effectively fuck with Kratos, and it feels like she thinks she's the right one in all respects, which is just baffling that she be blinded by such conceit and arrogance. But I guess she is the brain spunk of Zeus, so you can't really blame her for being the greatest bitch of the seven seas. She even comes back in Gal 2018 as a haunting spirit whenever Kratos has to confront his past for Atreus. She calls Kratos out and says, "You can't run from who you are, a big meanie." And in one of Kratos' greatest lines he says, "I may be a big meanie, but I'm no longer your big meanie." Oh, get owned, you transcendent asshole. Athena, I feel, is probably actually the underlying antagonist of the entire Greek saga. She is always there, egging Kratos along to do the worst things possible, and then she blames him for everything he does, and it's just like, why I oughta? It'd be one thing if she was just another angry, arrogant, avaricious god, but the fact that there's some nuance to her only makes her worse, because she uses all of her good qualities to be even worse. The next time you have a migraine, take some Plan B. Kratos' other siblings listed here are Herculad and Hephaestus, with a bit of asbestos. Herc has this weird jealousy of Kratos because he thought he should have been chosen to kill their fiery bro, but you can imagine what happens to him. This is another example of one of Zeus's children taking out their frustration towards Zeus onto Kratos. Hephaestus, on the other hand, actually helps Kratos for a bit at first. Despite his predicament being in part caused by Kratos, he actually gives him some directions and some useful tips and tricks. The only thing this handsome lug cares about is his robot daughter thing, Pandora. She is a Kingdom Hearts character that ended up here for some reason. All she talks about is the light in our heart, guiding our souls out of the deepest darkness, or some Destiny Islands bullshit like that. Once Kratos has his eyes set on using Pandora to kill Zeus, Hephaestus sets a trap for the living ghost for right after he takes care of Granddad. This works about as well as any attempt on Kratos' life, and Hephaestus is shown what for. During all this, there has been a drunken puppet master in the shadows, Hera. Every god in Gal 3 is a reflection of the evils of Zeus, but I feel Hera is the embodiment of his neglect. She is a lot like Hillary Clinton, where despite being married, their husbands will fuck literally anything but them. Zeus's neglect is very apparent throughout the diagram. As for Zeus, you are either his toy that he can use and discard at will, or you are dead. It's that simple. Hera doesn't care about her children in the slightest either, but she does manipulate those that fall under the same feeling of male validation starvation. Hercules is spurred on by Hera in much the same way Kratos is goaded by Athena. Even though she most likely would be violent and hostile towards Kratos, she is so wasted and pathetic by the point they clash that I think her malicious intent only counts by proxy. Kratos doesn't even intend to kill her at first, as he finds her so worthless. So being starved of validation once again, Hera provokes Kratos into killing her because she can't stand being left out of the fun. What a great character. The way she actually gets under Kratos' skin is by talking shit about her homunculus granddaughter, Panera. You see, Kratos is a family guy, and he's honestly such a softie once you get to know him. He is especially soft for things that remind him of his wife and particularly his daughter. His wife and daughter are always used throughout the Greek saga as manipulation points, whether it be Persephone fooling him into passivity with the neglectful father QTE, or Gaia turning into Lysandra to get Kratos off his ass. This hunk of stupid pills is always fooled by those who use the likeness of defenseless women he killed and feels bad about. How noble. Pandora is probably the biggest example of this, as Kratos' fatherly instincts kick in and he basically wants to make Pandora into his new daughter, because he is a sad and lonely male. The male loneliness epidemic is a real thing, and this is the worst of it. The fake relationship Kratos formed in his head within the 5 seconds of meeting his fake niece is apparently such a strong delusion that it supersedes Kratos' vengeance against Zeus. He destroys the entire rest of the Pantheon without issue, but throw a defenseless girl in front of him and he crumbles. Pandora serves a necessary purpose of providing hope to Kratos, but I still cannot handle her Norded-ass dialogue. Don't worry though, Zeus genuinely calls Kratos stupid and ugly the one time he lets his guard down to stop Pandora from fulfilling her plot significance, and the fight continues. I've not mentioned Zeus's brothers yet because I really feel like they are just extensions of Zeus's wrath and generational trauma or patricide for the purposes of this model. Even though Kratos killed Persephone and probably a few things Poseidon pretended to care about, let's be real, they really only accomplished the goal of Zeus's brothers in this series. To sum up the Greek side of Kratos' life, imagine your dad putting you in charge of Hitler as a reward for killing his other rebellious son who made you kill your wife and child. But now, there is another wife and child. Some thousands of years after the end of Gal 3 and the Greece games, we find Kratos where you'd think his skin color would indicate he is from, White Boy Land. By the time we start Gal 2018, Kratos had found himself and lost himself a nice giantess baddie, and even spunked out a little new shit, Boy of War. Though, at the time of Laufey's death, the dad of boy duo had yet to actually interact all that much, so naturally, seeing the disconnect between her boys, she died for the plot, and gave one last request to Dad of War. Just take a little hike up to the highest mountain in all the 9 realms, which of course is in a realm walked away by a legend, and the only way to achieve this road trip of all time is to team up together as father and son and kill the fuck out of some white guys. I can see why Kratos loved her so much, and why she is the only one who could break through his thick shell after literally obliterating his homeland. MANRAY Co. MANRAY Co. now! This video is sponsored by MANRAY Co. Have you ever wanted me to use a better mic than a shitty $10 Amazon clip-on, or heaven forbid my iPhone mic? If this is you, be grateful for MANRAY Co., a dear friend of the channel, who has provided me a nice frozen ape mic to use for these videos. Say thank you, MANRAY Co. Buy MANRAY Co. Buy now. Beer. Hell yeah. Now, back to your regularly scheduled slop. By the time we pick up back with Kratos, he has mellowed out a lot. I can relate to this, as my dad used to be a crazy hot-headed rebel who hated his licentious father who neglected him, only to have simmered down to a much quieter anger by the time he had me, boy. This means, though, that Kratos has a thick shell around his soul that he won't let anyone see. Not even himself. This becomes an issue because I don't know if you know how genetics work or not, but children tend to be made out of the same stuff their parents are made out of, which certainly cuts out Kratos' work for him, because I don't know if you remember from like 2 minutes ago, but he really doesn't have the best relationship with his own papa. The reason why the Norse duology are so good is because of this impossibly hard relationship. These two hard-headed rebellious boys are tasked with keeping each other safe and loving one another, as well as themselves. I know it's probably overstated, but how people feel about The Last of Us is how I feel about the Norse games. They fix my daddy issues, bro. It makes me cry. Kratos' character arcs in these two games can largely be summed up as learning to let Atreus in after learning to protect his boy from becoming like he was all those games ago. And in Ragnarok, he has to learn to trust Atreus' own agency and let his son initiate his own apocalypse of his homeland. It's sweet stuff, especially considering just how much Kratos really cares for his boy, as they are the only family either of them has left. Atreus is a spunky little dude who has just as much anger and destroyer instincts as his father, but in a much tinier form, which is really ironic given that both Kratos and Faye carry the giant gene. Guess it's highly recessive. Atreus' character arc in 2018 is very much a purposeful instigator of classic Kratos conflict. Atreus represents the conflict between Kratos' past, present, and future, as a destroyer and father, as the god of war, and the god of hope. Atreus spends 2018 going from a presumably normal boy to a half-giant, half-god, god-slayer, and somehow coming to terms with that, thankfully with the help of an ever-loving, if ever-stubborn Kratos. Atreus' anger and power is able to be utilized for the betterment of both the world and the boys. At the end, the bombshell is dropped that Atreus is actually Loki, who could be considered the traditional trickster antagonist of actual Norse mythology. This becomes what Ragnarok is all about, as Atreus has to discover who he is as an individual and also the arbiter of the apocalypse. Again, thankfully to those around them, as well as their relationship itself. The bear and wolf are able to navigate this tricky and marginally rushed story as best they possibly could, and the world and people of the 9 realms are all the more thankful for it. However, Talking about Dad of Boy without mentioning Mimir is like talking about Stoic and Hiccup without talking about their gay uncle. Mimir acts like the greatest pet ever. What I mean by that is he has no agency himself, but instead acts as a bank of infinite wisdom, but more importantly, a bank of love and affection for both the boys to use while navigating their world and their relationship. Mimir isn't just the goat because of his horns. He's just a really genuinely nice and intelligent guy, used for the betterment of both Kratos and Atreus. To see Kratos value Mimir enough to genuinely call him brother is something so sweet it makes me want to die. Thankfully, this brother is immortal, so we can't fuck up this one. They just make a genuinely lovely little family. It almost makes me forget that this is the game series about killing family members. But of course, Talking Head isn't the only fellow these fellas meet on their journey for Bag of Mom. In fact, these fellows meet another pair of parent and child. But I don't think these two are on a wholesome journey. Yes, now we get to talk about the other half of the fucking image. Hooray! Yippee! As you can see, there's a lot of anger coming to and through Baldur here. For now, understand that Baldur's balderness is the anger point from which all violence and hatred flow forth to the Kratosians. In Gout 2018, the best thematic foils of all time show up, and yes, it's a boy mom and her feral son. Freya is certainly a mother. Nothing can take that from her. Oh wait, I think somebody tried that though. I wonder how that turned out. So Baldur is actually the first Norse god to show up in 2018, which for Norse and God of War fans was probably crazy knowing what his inevitable death at the hands of Kratos means, I mean. When he comes stumbling into their shack, he is actually looking for Faye, because Odin is really into tracking the giant mommies, if you know what I mean. But thankfully, she had died for the plot about 2 minutes beforehand, so all he found was Kratos, but unfortunately, he found Kratos. After that, it's pretty much on site whenever the two meet. Once the boys start their journey for realsies, they eventually find themselves with a witch lady named Freya. It turns out this nice lady is actually the mother of Baldur. But why aren't they going on silly adventures together like Krat and Trey? Well, Freya is the ultimate helicopter mom of all time. Gods have got to stop reading prophecies about themselves because Freya finds out through a prophecy that Baldur is going to die one day. Despite the fact that every mother's child will die one day, this one just couldn't handle that concept. So she made the rational decision of removing her son's ability to feel anything in exchange for immortality and eternal nothingness. Similarly to Kratos, it is on site after this point between him and her, because he hates her as much as Kratos hated that one guy that one time. It's interesting because Freya got the same result as Zeus by doing the exact opposite thing, being too concerned and caring for their child's well-being, thus causing the child to be cut off from everything. This is what Kratos must learn to avoid, as he must balance the thin line between being the worst dad ever and the worst mom ever. Baldur also reflects Atreus by being a child spoiled by the concern of his well-being, and as such resents his parent. While Atreus has not nearly developed enough to get to the depravity of Baldur, he is an omen for what could become of a sheltered child, while also being a demonstration of how batshit insane the gods are. At the end of the game, we find out, wow, Baldur's weakness is actually mistletoe, which, might I say, is the worst weakness ever. Could you imagine he's at an Asgard Christmas party and a coworker kisses him under mistletoe and he just fucking dies? You'd think he'd be happy once the curse is dropped, but he for some reason thinks that's the opportune time to fight the known god killer instead of like taking a nice hot shower. At some point in this confrontation, Freya takes over a reanimated big boy corpse. Eventually, Baldur lets up and focuses his rage on Mother Myrist. Unfortunately, Kratos was there and he wanted to make a good example in front of his boy, so he decided to parent someone else's child. Not a good move. Freya would have much rather let herself die for the happiness of Baldur, but again, Kratos wanted to set an example of being better men by killing another person's child right in front of her. This makes Freya a little upset, and she immediately brings up his hypocrisy with his whole situation that happened over there. This is when Kratos opens up to Boy about who he really is, i.e. the ghost of Sparta. And Atreus is like, is that all being a god is? Sons killing parents? Brothers killing brothers? A very astute observation, by boy. But Dado says, no, we must be better men. Did you not hear what I just said? And yeah, that's basically the story of Gao 2018. Dad and boy go up to a mountain for bag of mom, while Dad has to deal with who he was in the past and accept himself so that he might accept his son and give him the love and care he deserves. One last thing that most of you probably know already, but Kratos says, the cycle ends here, when he snaps the neck of Baldur. And what do you know? That's the exact same thing that his dad said to him as he killed him at the start of Gao 2. And yes, Kratos does end the cycle of children killing their parents, but not of parents killing their children apparently. And it actually works this time. Let's talk about Ragnarok. Despite my yapping, Freya and Baldur were actually appetizers for the rest of the Odinsons. So let's talk about the Allfather himself, Odin. Odin is a lot like Zeus, but different in just enough places to be interesting. He doesn't manipulate his kids with overwhelming strength, but rather by his silver tongue. They both manipulate their children like toys, and similarly throw them away when they don't need them. Unfortunately though, Odin does not like when his toys are broken, but he'd rather them be broken than to share. Odin's relationship with Freya is due to the fact they were a political marriage. After creating the ultimate meth head out of her and Odin's son, she fled the Aesir, which Odin responded by saying, fine, you can leave my side, but you'll be on house arrest. He locked her in Midgard once he realized he couldn't play with her anymore. As for Baldur, Odin just treats him like a crazy employee that's really good at their job. Baldur probably could have posed Odin some actual trouble, but thankfully what Odin asked of Baldur is exactly what he would have wanted to do anyway, track down and kill people. But once Baldur was given a crick in the neck, Odin got a little upset. All of Odin's sons are total shitheels, but the shittiest of all of Odin's heels is definitely Heimdall. He is most similar to Athena and her bottom-feeding ass. Heimdall is just arrogance incarnate, made worse by his inescapable insecurity he has thanks to Mr. Din. Thankfully, he gets what's coming to him when Kratos shows up with a spear of justice. Last but certainly not least is everyone's favorite Thor. Thor and Odin, assumedly, have the same relationship Kratos would have had if he stayed under Zeus's thumb. But, as they say, a choice from the gods is just as useless as the gods themselves. Not that Odin gives Thor even the choice to think, just ever. Thor is very different from Chris Hemsworth, although maybe not in that one movie. This Thor is a horrifyingly sad drunkard who hates thinking because he knows that if he were to think for himself just once, it would all be over. And he's right, but he doesn't have to be so glum about it. Odin's emotional abuse of Thor is something for the ages. He only exists to be Odin's muscle and nothing more. No wonder he likes drinking so much. It's the only way to turn your frontal lobe off for a bit, which Odin actually abuses as well. Odin isn't the type to hold an intervention for his son. He's the type to hold an intervention to keep his son drinking so he's easier to use. But what is Odin even scared about? Well, you'll never guess. But a prophecy tells of a war called Ragnarok that would doom the 9 realms and end in Odin's death. But really, it's just that last part he's scared about. For all his wisdom, he is still lacking certainty on what happens to him once he dies, which is why he's so interested in that green portal thing which probably leads to the source code. It is this mortality that we all face that drives Odin insane. It doesn't matter how much control he has now, because he must always have control, and just the certainty that he will one day lose that control is what drives him to that very ruin. The Norse games make very good use of the source Norse material because the Norse cast is very familiar with the intended sequence of events. So, once Baldur dies, that's when Odin gets really scared and sends the rest of the kin after the bear and wolf. I also can't help but feel a super meta layer, where Odin is scared of the Rust Ragnarok, like the actual Ragnarok section of Gao Ragnarok was ironically very rushed. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, but a merry one nonetheless. Actually, Baldur wasn't the first Norse god to be Kratos intolerant. That would actually be Thor's eldest son, Magni. The shitheel comment I made earlier about Odin's sons should apply twofold to Magni and Modi, as Thor's sons are twice the shitheel Thor already was, each. The two idiots are used as high-ranking goons for Baldur's mission. When they run into Kratos and Atrui, they start fighting because these guys don't know he's the ghost of Sparta. Unfortunately, when Modi, the far weaker and shit-healier of the brothers, starts really threatening son of Sparta, the real ghost of Sparta shows up because again, Kratos is a family guy. He chops Magni's face in without even trying, and Modi is actually pissing and shitting his pants at this. According to the traditional Norse mythology, Magni and Modi are the main survivors of Ragnarok. In fact, they pretty much have no other significance, so the fact that Kratos just nonchalantly shattered their literal plot armor leaves Modi scared beyond reason. His death was never a possibility to him, until now. And as we know, Odin's blood doesn't seem to like their own mortality that much. While Magni was just a shit-for-brains tough guy, Modi is a shit-for-brains Weasley guy, and as such, takes his agency, anxiety, and anger out through manipulation, particularly of the young son-to-be Loki. Modi is constantly harassing and picking on Atreus specifically, likely because he finds a kinship of weakness through him. Modi is a cowardly wimp who hides behind his father, brother, and a shield for good measure. I'm sure seeing a tiny little son next to a hulking father made his insecurities about himself flare up, thus inciting the particular harassment. At some point, Modi has to drag his ass to Asgard without Magni, much less the people who killed him, or the giant they were actually looking for in the first place. This supreme failure made Odin upset a bit, I'm sure, but it made Thor utterly furious. He gives Modi a beating that literally kills him, at least that's what Kratos says. Atreus didn't exactly help Modi's health, as even when he was literally dying in front of them, the shit-heel can't help but talk shit to expel any of his insecurity he could with his last breath before Atreus scratched his neck a little bit. This moment serves as the lowest of the low for Atreus, as this was when he was still power-tripping over being a god. His rash actions taken through sheer rage reminds me a lot of this one guy I knew one time. This moment of seeing his son very much murder someone was a wake-up call to Kratos that he better rein in his boy before he has a Kratos Jr. case on his hands. Odin and Thor's response to this series of events in the opening of Ragnarok really paints the whole picture of how awful this family is. Odin starts by leveraging the fact that Kratos and Atreus have been responsible for 3 deaths of his family. He says the first 2, Magni and Modi, were just self-defense, right in front of Thor. But Baldur was actually useful, so that was out of line. Once Kratos denies the deal for peace Odin offers, we get Thor's response: blood payments. The only way Thor can feel any kind of joy in this world is when he's beating the shit out of someone or being beaten the shit out of. And for him, it's hopefully both. He just wants a good fight out of the ordeal, and even brings Kratos back from the brink, just so he can get a taste of who killed his sons. You don't want to see Dad of Boy, he wants God of War. Unfortunately, those two concepts are interlinked, especially nowadays, and it's only once Thor starts talking about messing with Atreus that Kratos really shows him what for. One of my favorite exchanges in the whole series is here.
He died of the wounds you gave him! Oh, you got a model father!
And it's like, yeah, fair point. Thor is definitely not a model father by any means, though. Kind of the opposite, actually, given that he beats his son a step away from death. I'm sure this isn't the first time the Thunderman brute did something like this to his kids, especially given his lack of interest in doing anything else with them. Well, actually, the only interaction we see between Thor and one of his children is actually him and Thrud, and man, is it depressing. I can tell a bunch of the staff have had this experience before of caring for an overly neglectful and drunken fool of a parent, and that is certainly what happens here. I guess it's better than the alternative, but only so much as Limbo is an upgrade from Hell. Thankfully, in case you haven't noticed, the only Odinsons to survive Ragnarok are the women. I wonder why that is. Well, for Thrud and her mom, Sif, it is because they are the only reasonable people in Asgard. Odin has no use for Thrud, and he could care less about Magni and Modi, who he should feel at least a little responsible for. Given that, and the way he treats Thor more like one of those bully dogs than his son, Sif doesn't much like Allfather, so she's one of the few that are actually ballsy enough to talk back to Allfather, especially when he brings Loki around like absolutely nothing happened. Thankfully, Sif and Thrud make it out of Ragnarok in place of Magni and Modi, and they have both come to accept that Odin was actually the bad guy of the game, and not Kratos or Boy. Thrud and the furry son seem to actually get along well as friends, which is sweet, even though he definitely is more responsible than not for Magni and Modi's death. Before finishing up the Odin sins, I actually wanted to talk a little about Freya. Her divorced housewife predicament has left her unending desire for revenge a little neutered. Kratos uses this opportunity to make peace, which is very mature and kind of him. For his standards, I mean. In fact, I would argue that Kratos and Freya's relationship rings very similarly to Deimos' relationship with Kratos, where he understands that he can never be forgiven, but he honestly works for the betterment of the relationship, which is a very novel thing for the so-called destroyer of worlds to do. I bring this up to say it's not as if Freya has beef with Deimos, but rather I used their proximity to one another as a way to compare their similarly nuanced relationship with the Bald Fury. Kratos actually brings up Deimos to Freya once they get into her home realm, and he is introduced to Freya's brother, who she is equally conflicted with. It's nice symmetry, and Kratos' rehabilitation is just so sweet to me. Okay, so in a big twist at the end of Ragnarok, Thor and Kratos fight again, but it is much more a battle of will than of strength. Over the fight, Kratos finally convinces Thor to think for himself for once in his life. Not even a second after Thor is like, maybe I should think before I listen to everything my daddy tells me. The given daddy stabs him through his gargantuan beer belly. This moment really goes to show that if Odin can't control something, then nobody will. In the end, Odin isn't killed by the many major characters he's hurt, but rather the little OCD dwarf brutalizes his soul gem for taking something that didn't belong to him. I think Genograms as a whole are a really fun way of cataloging relationships and family dynamics. I feel that this silly genogram of fictional people from a game series that came out in the same era with the same aesthetic as Shadow the Hedgehog really shows how reflective relationships are as a whole. The people we touch carry their impression of us throughout their lives, and can even imprint that same touch to other people. We're all going to die one day, and most of us won't go by patricide, but we should appreciate the people we have in our lives while we have them, because you never know when a raving albino Spartan is going to come slashing in talking about zoos or whatever. Hi, thanks for watching the video. This one was a constant work in progress. This is attempt number 3 and hopefully the last one, but such is art. I just couldn't help but make my product better. It is my burden, but I hope you guys enjoyed Genograms. I have a bunch of Genograms of other fictional families I made that are much more marginally accurate to actual professional Genograms. They include Always Sunny, Shameless, and JoJo's. And maybe Arrested Development, we'll see. I don't know, this is a fun gimmick to do, a niche that I haven't seen on YouTube, so maybe this will become a trend for my videos. But let me guys know if you would actually like to see that, because they're always really fun to make and talk about. The Selfish Gene video will be out when it's out, that's all I can say. Drive safe, drink water, and like and subscribe or I will fucking die.